Lars, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I am very honored that you allow me to come here and talk about my thoughts and opinions and the second time. And it's a good thing I wasn't thrown out from the first time. So I will be sharing my thoughts on how to start the incident. So, and primarily focus towards fire, even though a lot of these thoughts can be applied on other types of incidents. I'm a firefighter person, so it's all about firefighting. These are my thoughts alone. It doesn't mean that they're correct. They're just based on my experience as a firefighter, as an officer, but mostly as a trainer, where I go around meeting people all around the world and share ideas and thoughts. And when you see patterns from one country to another, and you see these similarities, but also differences, you start notice these grand patterns also, which I try to implement in everything I do. But take it for what it is. It's my thoughts. If you find something valuable or interesting or thought-provoking, take them back home and talk to your colleagues and your friends and about what they think, and do your own homework, and maybe there's some value in the end. The focus was the first minute, and that's the really bit I find mostly interesting. I mean, there's a lot of things that are interesting about firefighting, of course, about techniques and tactics and methods. But the first minute was really one of the things that struck me when I became an officer, because it's where I failed the most time, where I felt the most inadequate of solving the mission I was supposed to be doing. So I will try to focus on that, and I will go through where my thoughts took me over the years. So if we take a fire, and we take a sort of an extreme example, but still there's a fire. We arrive to some sort of chaos. In this case, we have a fire, there's people on the balconies, and people are dropping, there's civilians trying to pick people up. It's a mess. Now, this is what we're supposed to do. This is what we're supposed to be good at. This is what we train for. But the reality for me is that the system and the things I was taught really didn't match this. It didn't, because most of the tools that were given to me was built by the average fire, not the hard fire, the average fire, which is not that complicated. I mean, there's a lot of challenges, but it's not that complicated. It's not that fast. If you take a situation like this, we can discuss over table topics, questions like, if we arrive to this one, do you want someone to raise a ladder? Maybe that's a good thing. Do you want to raise your own ladder, or do you want to use the ladders on the site? Do you want to use those? Questions about, what if the ladders are not safe? Is it still possible? Oh, it's an emergency. Of course we can use these ones. Or should we catch people, the ones who are falling? Or should we tell them to wait if possible? If they fall, can we catch them? How heavy are they? Are going to hurt the firefighters catching them? Should we suppress the fire? There's a lot of fire here. It's directly threatening the people here, both the bottom floor, top floor. Should we direct manpower towards, dragging hose lines out? What kind of hose line should we use? What kind of technique should we use when we cool this fire? Should we aim at the bottom floor, the top floor? How should we do that? What would you do with all the other civilians that are trying to help? Should we try to remove them, leave the scene, leave it to the professionals, or should we ignore them, meaning let them do whatever they do so that they're trying to help, and if that's a good thing? Or should we try to instruct them? Should we divide manpower or mental power to actually instruct them, do this, to try this instead? How about the staircase? Because this might not be the only problem. We have a staircase maybe in the facility. Are there more people trying to evacuate there? Is it filled with smoke? Do we have to clean the staircase? Because the staircase is the most important room in this house, probably. If that's not clear, we're going to have more problems later, or still already problems in the staircase. How about doing 360 around the building? Maybe the other side of the building is equally bad. Maybe it's even worse than this side. How about utilities? Is this a gas fire? Could we put out the gas? Are there electrical power lines running over this fire, ready to melt and start falling down? How about arrival reports? Should I stay in the vehicle for 30 seconds, do my arrival report, ask for more resources, or should I start catching babies? We can discuss this over table topics for hours. You could discuss it for days, this situation. And you're going to have multiple different answers. And this is the reality, right? This is how complicated most things are, but on different levels. There's so many things to do, so many things to consider, so much information to gather, to analyze. And I quickly felt, even though I didn't have these kinds of scenarios, I quickly felt overwhelmed. And the more I studied and learned about fire, about buildings, about chemical substances, the more things I noticed. There's blissful ignorance. If I didn't learn about different types of smoke from fires and pressures and everything, I didn't look for it. It was just fire. But the more I learned, the more there was to analyze. And the more it was to analyze, the more things I did not have time for. And I felt really ill-equipped when I started going to fires. And I thought I need to get better. But as much as I try to get better, I realized I'm not being successful at solving this problem because there's too much to do at too little time. I forgot to mention, but if you can't see the entire slide, there's 3 buttons, 3 dots by my name or the slide here, where you can add fit to frame, and then you'll get to see the whole image so that you see me on the side and all the slides. So when I made a list, I started, this was just for my own sake. When I became an officer, I need to start structuring what I'm supposed to do. And I started writing lists and bullet lists on everything I was supposed to do, and grouping things and exploding things and putting it back together. And you can create a list. And this is just one type of list that you need to, for instance, search for information. Yes, I'm supposed to search for information to gather that and make a good decision. I should make an arrival report to be a base for more resources and all those things. You need to place the vehicles. The trucks should be not too close, not too far away, should be shielded, a little bit of noise from the engine. It should allow spaces for the aerial to pass. It should be easy to fill from a hydrant. I need to make an assessment if it's safe to work around the building. Is there power hazard? Is there structural collapse? Do we have threats from the public? Is there chemical substances? Is it pressure vessels? I need to instruct people that might be in danger. People standing on the balcony, you can stay there, or you should evacuate to the staircase, or you should jump. I need to search and evacuate life. Are there people inside the door? I need to open the door and see if there's people in there. Can I scream and hear them? Are there people in the staircase that need assistance? I need to search and cool for flames and smoke. I need to do gas cooling and fire. If there's fire blowing out a window, I need to get water up there. I need to put water into a wall or a window or whatever it might be. I need to isolate the fire. I should close doors to prevent oxygen coming in, to have smoke spreading out in the staircase. I should ventilate adjacent rooms that are not affected by fire, but maybe smoke leaking. I ventilate the staircase, ventilate the next building, the next row house, the apartment above, to prevent property losses, but also, of course, later potential rescues. I should do different types of immediate actions that are not accounted for, whatever it might be. Oh, you need to take care of that cardiac arrest on the street. Also, we need to prepare the first order, which means that what are we supposed to do? How should we solve all these things? I need to build a resource depot. You know, where's all the resources that we're going to use? Where's the whole hoses going to be? The fans, everything. This is sort of a list about things I need to consider and getting done. And everything should happen now. It's very hard to make this into a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 checklist. I first do this, then I do this, then I do this, because it's always different. And most of the things are, yeah, they have to be done now. And this was too hard for me. I had to really on, because the philosophy that was given to me by, in this case, the Swedish Fire Service, was that I am the commander. I'm the crew commander of this fire truck. I'm the incident commander of this, this area. Is that I, as a commander, I should tell the driver, you should place your car over here. That's where the truck should be, because as a commander, I have the overarching thought about how should I want to attack over here, therefore the truck should be here. Therefore, it's best that I make that decision because I know the most. I have a plan in my head where we're supposed to work and so on. And obviously, if the only thing I had to do as an officer was to place the vehicle, that would be great. That'd be fantastic. I can consider all those things. Where should it be? And park it around the corner here. Then we don't have enough pump noise to where we're going to work. Oh, that's far enough. That's 20 meters. That's roughly where I want it. Not 15, not 25. Not too close, not too far away. But as we all know, the fire truck always gets placed basically in the wrong position because I don't have enough time as a commander. I don't know what's going on. I don't have time or information to make a good decision. Because I also need to direct one firefighter and make you do a quick search. Oh, I want you to go into that door there, see if there's anyone lying in the hallway there before so that we don't, fast as possible. Check if there's fire and smoke and so on. I want, firefighter 2, I want you to knock down that fire coming from the second floor. I want to, transitional attack through that window. And firefighter 3, I want you to raise a ladder over here because we have a potential, people who want to save up on that second floor. There's so many things I have to consider. But again, the idea was, as a commander, you should have the most of the information. You should have a plan. You should work on that plan. You should systematically arrange all the possible outcomes and pick the most optimal solution to get the most perfect outcome. It sounds very, very good. It sounds very utopian that we should always analyze and make the optimal decision. And for me, that wasn't the reality. I was constantly missing things, and I was missing obvious things. I remember the first time I went to a fire as a crew commander, as a temporary crew commander, and I went to a stable fire. It was a fire in a stable. The stable didn't have any animals. It was empty. It was built together with an apartment, so out in the countryside. The apartment was all burnt down, and there was a firewall, a sort of firewall between the apartment that was burnt out and the rest of the stable. And in the stable, the fire was starting to spread. So we had smoke in the ceiling inside the stable. My task was to protect the firewall. And I looked through a window up on the safe side, or there should be safe side of the firewall, and it was flames and smoke starting to penetrate in that hallway. And I could see all the way up to the ridge of the ceiling inside. So it was entire open space. There was no middle floor or anything. It was totally open. On another sector, they were trying to use the Cobra to cool the fire gases in the attic on this stable, and they were struggling because it didn't work. Technically the Cobra didn't work that time. And I was walking back and forth between those two sectors, and on one sector they believed, the other sector, that there was a middle floor in the stable, that there was sort of an attic space which they were trying to cool, because it was very easy to cool up here. You just have to go into the door and cool up, but they haven't done that, so they thought there was a floor. I knew there wasn't a floor, But when I went to that sector, I forgot about that. And I was living under the impression that there was a floor here, that we have to get that going to cool that attic space. And I went to the other sector, then it wasn't magically any floor anymore. We can take a hose line and just cool straight up into the air. And I went back and forth there, switching my worldview every time. It's just bizarre. In hindsight, it's bizarre that my brain didn't actually make that connection that, hey, there's no floor. You can just step in, cool up, stop bothering with the Cobra. But my brain is faulty. It's a bad brain, but it's the only brain I have, and I have to work with it. I started realizing that when I arrive to a fire, I don't know anything else that the firefighters don't know. I don't have any better situational awareness about what's going on. The firefighters can see themselves, what's happening outside a fire truck. They've heard all the radios. I don't know anything else. I don't have any vantage point where I can make a better decision than them. I didn't get a new brain when I started officer training. I didn't get a new brain, looking at level 2 brain. So now I can analyze much more information and collect and analyze much more information without problems. It's the same brain. When I was a firefighter, I had to deal with my personal protective gear and maybe, hose and a nozzle sort of. Now I had to think about 20 things more, but it's the same old brain. And I didn't get any training, basically, at least in the Swedish Fire Service, about how you do things. Like I wasn't better at actually attacking a fire through a window. Like, you need to keep the stream steady. It has to be a straight stream, steep, nothing. We didn't talk about techniques at all. We hardly talked about tactics. It was mostly about strategy and how to sector things and how to talk and communication, all important things. But I wasn't really better at how to do firefighting after I went to officer training. And I realized for me that I'm supposed to take decisions here, but I'm not really on the first minute in a position to take any better decisions than anyone else. Now we have someone with a mic on. There we go. So what I realized that if I'm going to create a system that works for me, I need to create a system where the commander gets time and help to collect that information, analyze it, and decide on it. I need to create that time for me because I don't have time. There's no time. If I don't have time, I can't think. I can just do. If I'm talking or if I'm listening, I don't have time to think. I can't talk and listen and think at the same time. It's not possible. Right now, I'm talking to you. You are listening. You are listening. You don't have time to process, really. You just absorb. You don't really have time to reflect. That's going to happen afterwards. When you watch this video again, maybe. I don't really have time to evaluate what I'm saying because I'm trying to recollect what the hell I'm going to say. And the same goes for the fire. So there's very precious little time and thinking going on. Mostly it's just reacting. I wanted to create a sign on my back that it says, stop bothering me, I'm thinking. That was my ideal scenario when I got to a fire. But during this time, when I'm as a commander do commander thing, which is one thing, is just thinking, obvious problems need solving. We have a fire blowing out a window. That obviously needs solving. We have people standing on a balcony. That obviously needs solving. We have a smoke in the staircase. That obviously needs solving. But it doesn't take a commander to figure that out. It's not like the firefighters don't realize, we should save that fire for later, I think. No, there's no fire saving for later. There's no later time to fix the staircase. It has to be done now. So I started tinkering with a framework for how I should think about this for myself. And of course, the purpose of a framework to start the incident is to break or delay a negative event. Of course, we want something the fire to, extinguish, of course, but at least just break it, sort of pause it. The goals of the framework has to be that it maintains the commander's control over work safety. At least in Sweden, and as in most countries, as an officer or a commander, you are responsible for the safety of the crews. So I need to maintain control over that. I can't lose control. If someone in the Swedish Fire Service, especially when I started, mentioned that you should allow firefighters to do whatever they wanted, that was a sign of being a bad officer, because you're not in control. That's basically anarchy. You wanted to maintain the commander's control of the response, not only over safety, but of course you need to, make sure that the incident is going generally in the direction that is in your thought. That, someone is doing this, someone is doing that, and there's no cohesion. It has to be control. You want to create a better situational awareness for the commander. Now, I say situational awareness for the commander, and I avoid using words like a shared situational awareness, or what's the English word? A common. No, I think it's shared situational awareness, that everybody knows everything, and I think that's pretty much hogwash. It's impossible that everybody knows everything, and it's not necessary. It takes a lot of time. It's not even possible. It's utopia. Now, it's good to have information if it's really needed. So we work on a need-to-know basis in reality. But the situational, the commander should at least try to have the most situational awareness what's going on. And we want to try to help that commander get that. Again, we need to create time for the commander to collect and analyze information, both like just talking to people, collecting information, but also standing still, thinking, and just analyzing. What am I supposed to do? What is going on? And I want to activate all the personnel at arrival. How I was taught was to basically, you arrive with the fire truck. As a commander, I walk outside, maybe talk to someone, check what's going on, and the firefighters are waiting in the fire truck or maybe behind the fire truck, because they're supposed to wait until I've made a decision what to do. Sometimes you guess, okay, see smoke, I think we're going to go in that door. It takes 5 seconds, but it's just a guess. Might be wrong, might be good. Or other times it takes a longer time, but none of the firefighters are supposed to do anything until they're ordered to. To me, that was a horrible, horrible, horrible solution. We have, if we're on a standard crew in Sweden, 1+4 firefighters, 1+4, 1 commander, 4 firefighters, we have 4 brains not operating. That's not acceptable. We have 8 arms, 8 legs that are not doing things. That's not acceptable. The framework should allow firefighters to act without orders. And this is where a lot of my colleagues, officers, become scared. And I don't mean scared as in they're scared. I mean, they're worried is a better word. If we allow firefighters to act without orders, we're creating chaos. If we're creating chaos, that's not good. We can't have anarchy. Okay, so we need to create a framework that allows them to operate without orders, but still maintain control, as we said. And we'll get to that. And this needs to function without specific requirements on staffing, meaning it couldn't be locked towards being 1 officer and 4 firefighters, for instance, because that's not how everybody operates. Maybe some operate 1 officer, 2 firefighters. Maybe it's just 2 firefighters. Maybe it's just 1 officer, and so on. How you respond or how you arrive will vary over Sweden, as for all countries. Now, what that means is if I have an ideal goal, and we'll get to those, that I want firefighters to work by themselves. That means I can start making a list, and I started making a list. What can a firefighter do without an order? I started making just a long list of everything I possibly could think about, but at a fire, what could firefighters do by themselves? I didn't have, as long as it was a good thing to do, I couldn't offer anything. Like if someone said, fireball in our window, could a firefighter suppress it? Yes, I don't offer anything. They could decide on what tool to use, how to do it. If they're just educated properly, I don't add anything. I'm not needed. It doesn't require a commander. But I also need to tell me, okay, what can't they do? It's obvious that this is in Sweden and Finland too, that a firefighter can't go inside alone in a building and start smoke diving just because they feel that it would be necessary. No, you can't do that. That's not okay. You have to be 2 people and so on. So I made a long list of what firefighters can't do. So the can-do list is what I call the possible tasks startup. And these are part of the things that you have is part of the list I'm going to go through, and part of the list we went through what's supposed to happen. And there's also restrictions, which is, if not as important, maybe even more important, as firefighters can do, because everything they can't do is the things that will get us into trouble. So we need restrictions in what the firefighter can and cannot do. So what needs to be done? Going back to that list. Okay, so if I try to group this, and you can group it and name it and smash things together in any way you like to get to this, but this is one of the lists I make, which I'm fairly happy with. Let's say we have three things here. We want to drop off personnel equipment close to the event, meaning someone needs to drop me off as a commander, need to drop off some firefighters so we can start to work. Doesn't mean that that's the place where you park, which is usually what happens. You drop people off, and now you've parked, and now you're in the wrong position because we don't know where we're going to park. But if someone after that drop off of personnel thought about it and said, oh, well, if we're going to go in there, okay, it seems like we're going to go in over here. Now, maybe if we place the truck over here behind this wall, now it's shielded, not too far off, and so on. Someone has the time to do so and then suggest that back to me. Oh, I thought about it. Maybe we should place a truck over here. And as a commander, I can go, oh, sounds great. I don't have a better solution. Or maybe as I say, no. We're going to go in on the other side of the building. So we're going to take it over there. But if someone suggests that to me, that would be great. I don't have to think about it. Someone else who can dedicate more time and mental capacity to that task can do that. The same goes for the resource depot. When the truck is being placed, we need to take the equipment that is the most needed, the most urgent, place them close to where we want to work, like at a traffic accident, like at a fire. Okay, if someone thinks about that, okay, we're gonna, that's the truck, and over here we're gonna, work. Let's place the resources here. They're not in the way of people walking, or the aerial coming, and so on. And they suggest that to me. Okay, I'm going to place all the equipment over here. Is that fine? I go, 2 thumbs up. Sounds great. I don't have to think about it. And to me, this would be obvious, like the driver tasks. I don't want to think about that as a commander. I don't want to think about, where the truck should be. That's not, I have way too many things to do to focus on that. And I presume you feel the same as many of your commanders, that every time you do this, you're not very happy about the outcome of the truck placement because it's not a priority. It's not something you have a lot of time to dedicate to. And still, it's a very important thing to get right. Another list of things that needs to happen is that we want to search and evacuate life. Of course, we want to find people. We want to search and cool flames and smoke, meaning we want to knock down the fire. We want to cool some smoke. We want to search and isolate flames and smoke. We want to close doors and prevent smoke from spreading. We want to ventilate smoke that fill adjacent spaces that are safe to ventilate, like a staircase. We want to ventilate that. We want to ventilate the adjacent living room or apartment or building. And we want to give tips. We want to help the commander, saying, I want to suggest, this might be a good thing to do. And this would be typical firefighter tasks. We want firefighters to run around like missiles. I call them missiles because they run out and try to achieve certain things. I don't want to think about this. I don't provide anything from finding the fire. It's better Someone can run around and try to find where the fire is. I don't have to run around trying to figure out what the smoke is. Better someone else does and tell me, oh, there's smoke in the staircase. Oh, good to know. Now I know that. Oh, it's smoke in the staircase, but I ventilated already. Oh, even better. That's like awesome. Two valuable pieces of information that I can build on top of what we're supposed to do next. Because I still have things in my list that I try to make that is very hard to get someone else to do. For instance, the arrival report, describing the situation, suggesting maybe added resources depending on how big it is. Someone has to be at least formally in charge of searching for me information, both from the crew that you send out, less missiles, and also from people standing there and so on. Someone has to make the initial risk assessment for special risks. What are special risks for everything that's not supposed to be there? If firefighters run into the staircase to isolate the fire, I expect them to know that there's fire smoke in there. And fire smoke is toxic, so they will use a breathing protection. And it might get hot, so they will use fire protection. I expect that. That's normal. I shouldn't be able to, I don't have to tell them that. But if I realize there's a meth lab on second floor on this apartment building, that's a special hazard that I need to deal with. Or if there's a pressure vessel in it, or if there's something else that is not really normal, then it's my responsibility to highlight that and adapt for it. But that's hard. Like, how much time do you need to get that kind of information and make a process? That takes time. Instruct people in danger. If there's some people standing on the balcony, I need to have some kind of idea of what I want to do with those people. That's probably an officer thing. You know, should they evacuate? Should we raise a ladder? Should we take an aerial platform? Should they try to get out to the staircase? So instructing people is probably an officer thing. Or anything else that might add up, like if it, we want to raise a ladder, if that's not part of our pre-assigned positions and ideas, oh, we need to raise a ladder over here. Anything else that might add up. Oh, there's a person with a cardiac arrest here. I need to divide someone to deal with that, or some people. And of course, we want to prepare the first order. What's next? In my ideal world, firefighters run around and fixing things that are obviously broken. They cool fire. They shut doors. They ventilate the staircase. They ventilate the adjacent buildings. They do things they see obviously problem. Okay, what's next? So if we do all those things that I expect to happen, what's going to happen next? Do we have to do an interior attack over here? Do we have to do a defensive operation over here? Do we have to order excavator and dig a hole in this roof, or whatever it might be? What's going to happen next? That's my job. And also evaluate all those things happening here. Am I happy? If I say nothing, this is what's going to happen. The driver is going to do this. The firefighter is going to try to do this. Am I happy with that? Is it safe that they do this? That's my job. And if I'm a first responder, if I'm the only one arriving first, I am first a driver, and then I'm a firefighter, and then I'm a commander. And it's very important to remember that, because when I was a commander, I was taught that I'm always a commander. So when I arrived first at a fire, I was standing there outside with a radio and talking about, I want the first engine to prepare for this and the first and blah, 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 blah. So I was preparing for others to work. Instead of realizing, which took me a long time to realize, that I'm a firefighter first. I should first see if there's people in the building. I should first try to extinguish the fire with a portable fire extinguisher and so on. But I forgot about that, because that's not how I was taught. I was taught a commander does not do things. No, that's maybe true. But in that case, I'm not a commander. There's no one to command on the fire ground. It's just me, and I'm a firefighter after being a driver and placing my vehicle. So that's it. And then you have to strategize, prioritize which of these are the most important or not. But this is the list I came up with. And we will dive into some of those points, and I will expand on this, on those issues. But what we first have to go through in this framework is the restrictions. Because when I started thinking about these topics and I started introducing them to fellow officers, there was this massive fear or worry about losing control. That was the big issue. I'm losing control of what's going to happen. And it was very obvious from that feedback, but also from my own thinking, if we allow firefighters to do anything, it's going to be chaos. If we allow them to do dangerous things, of course, it's going to be dangerous. Someone is going to get hurt. There are some things you cannot do and some things you can do. So officers were going like, okay, well, no, it doesn't feel good. So I was trying to give them to a journey that send that. Okay, when you send firefighters in to do interior firefighting, okay, you give them an order. And you go inside the interior. Are you ordering them to, I want you to cool here and cool here? No, you're not there. They're acting themselves. Are you happy with that? And then all Swedish firefighters and the fire officers, Sweden, of course, the firefighters do, I trust them and they do their thing in the inside and they're highly trained to do that. Okay. So they're highly trained and they're highly, you feel very confident about that, but they're by themselves. They're doing their own things. So what's different when the firefighters come on the outside that makes you say that now they can't think for themselves, now they can't operate, now they can't do things, now I have to order them, otherwise it would be unsafe? What's the difference? Arguably, they're much safer on the outside rather than the inside. It's about training and trust. On the outside, we haven't trained upon what the firefighters are supposed to do. So as an officer, I don't trust them to do what they're supposed to do and not do things they're not supposed to do. If they're trained for interior attack, they're trained not to break off into, do each of their own and let go of the hose line. I don't expect them to do that as an officer because I know that they will not do that unless there's a problem. So I trust them. So it's about trust. It's about trusting that the firefighters are supposed to doing what they're supposed to do, not do anything else. And that's the same with control. I go like, but I lose control. I don't know what's happening. Well, you do. So if I give the firefighter an order, I give them saying, I'm turning around. We arrive at the fire and I turn around the fire truck and I said, okay, I want you to attack that fire. Bring a lay flat hose and do a transitional attack. Okay, so give them an order. I know what they're doing. Okay. Now, if you're already at the alarm, way before you see that, you hear at the radio, then go like, oh, we got fire blowing out on the second floor. You turn around. Okay, it seems like we have fire on the second floor. If you arrive and there's fire blowing out, I want you to take a lay flat hose and do a transitional attack. Okay, still an order. You told them what to do. You can change it if you arrive. It's not something else. Okay, what's the difference towards writing a standard operating guideline in 2 years before that event who says, if there's a fire coming out of the second floor on a multi-residential home, the firefighter sitting left back in the fire truck should do a transitional attack with a lay flat hose. There's no difference, right? The only thing I've done is I've taken away the need for the officer to make that decision so you can focus on something else. As the officer, I still maintain my control because I know what that firefighter is supposed to do. I know what they can't do. And if I need them to do something else, I just tell them. It's a guideline. It's not a rule. It doesn't say they have to do that. If the officer doesn't have any better things to do, they will do that. So that's you maintain the level of control. You maintain the level of safety. But it was a tough challenge for me to get to that position where people go like, okay, maybe this is possible, but it's still scary. So the restrictions at startup was one part. When I needed to realize I need to make them very specific because it's part of like a training. And for me, a guideline and what is training is sort of merged. the training is a guideline. If I send something in training that says you can't do this, you should do it that way, that's also a guideline. It's not a rule book, it's not a procedure, it's a guideline. So the purpose of these restrictions is, firstly, we need to ensure work safety. And secondly, we need to maintain the effectiveness of the response. So we want to have restrictions, but they should always allow for some kind of effectiveness. If I want to make a safe rule, it's very easy. Stay at the firehouse. You might get too fat by eating too much, but most of the dangers are gone. So we need to have a balance between safety and efficiency. Same as for the overarching framework, it should maintain the commander's control over safety. It should maintain the commander's control of the response, and it should make firefighter autonomy possible. It should allow firefighters to act on their own. And firefighters love to be able to think for themselves and act for themselves. So we have some tactical restrictions, meaning you should be max 10 seconds out of the commander's view, because that was a fear. So if we think about yourself, you're a commander, you're jumping out of the fire truck and you're trying to figure out what's going on. The firefighters run around doing whatever they're supposed to do, and they just, boom, gone. One is up the staircase, one is on the other side of the building, one is down in the basement, and you go, aha, I have an idea. I think we should do this to save the day. And you turn around and everybody's gone. That's a fear, because now you can't act. So we have a small restriction, and I have a small restriction saying that you can't be more than 10 seconds outside of commander's view, which means that if I'm a firefighter and I'm supposed to knock the fire down, and I think the fire is on the back side of the building, I have to ask the commander, is it okay if I go to the other side of the building? Because I know it's going to take me more than 10 seconds. If the commander has another idea of what's supposed to be done, they will say, no, you can't. Or if I'm a commander and I don't have anything better to do, so it's like, that sounds awesome. Go around, do that. Maybe they're gone for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, doesn't really matter. I know where they are and what they're doing. Should just ask the commander if you need more time. Do not lock down vehicles. The same thing. If I'm a commander, I jump out of the truck and firefighters go around doing their things. And I get an idea. I want to move the fire truck to the other side of the building. And I look around. Every fire hose is deployed from the fire truck. Oh, that's a problem, because now I can't move it. And I need to move it. So ask the commander if you want to deploy a hose system. Now, I don't define a single lay flat hose, just an example, or the hose reel is not defined as a hose system. That's just a single hose. You can easily disconnect it, or you can drive with the hose reel out, or you quickly roll it in. But you allow for a first transitional attack, a quick attack, but you still can move the fire truck. But you need to ask the commander if you want to deploy an aerial. If, for instance, you have the same thoughts about firefighter autonomy if you want to deploy an aerial, because it's very hard to move it. It takes time to move an aerial. There's also a restriction for do not open bigger holes than an apple for more than 10 seconds. So if you take an example like this, if the fire officer is doing something, the commander is walking around thinking about what to do, the firefighters want to attack the fire, they break the window, start applying water, which is great if they're able to suppress the fire. But if they're not, if they're shooting water on a wall and the fire is on the other side of the wall, nothing's going to happen here. But we allow a ton of air in, and now we have a bigger problem. So you can't do that, because you need to ask the commander if you want to break a window, for instance, that you can't shut anymore. You need to ask the commander. You can open the door, but you have to be able to close it. I don't want it open for 30 seconds, a minute, because that can drastically change the fire conditions. And you need to abort own initiatives and ordered by commander. If the commander says, hey, I have an idea, we're going to do an interior attack over here, then you just drop whatever you have and start doing that. Hey, I want you to stop doing that because I want you to prepare the hoses for the interior attack. Okay, then stop doing that. It's just something to do until the officer has a plan. Sometimes the officer has a plan within 5 seconds. Sometimes it takes a minute. Sometimes it takes 3. Something is happening meanwhile the officer is thinking. If you don't have anything to do, if you've done a transitional attack and you're done, the officer hasn't given you, the commander hasn't given you any new information, now you just go back to the commander, or if there's an established resource depot, you go there. Meaning you want to display that I am free, I have done what I'm supposed to do, I'm now free to do something else. So those are tactical restrictions, meaning if you do something like this for your firefighters, that means that you are probably not tying the hands behind the commander's back about what the commander wants to do next. Let's do a 5-minute break, Joel, and then we'll get into more restrictions and some examples on tasks and so.
Sounds good. 5-minute break, and we are back here 18:53 sharp. So 5 minutes technical break.
Nice. I like the precision.
See you later, 5 minutes. Please, Lars, floor is yours.
Okay. So we have those tactical restrictions to make sure that the incident flows and the commander can get in which direction they like. But you also have personal safety, of course, so that people don't do anything that's dangerous. I assume as a commander that the firefighters are never above or beyond a non-secured fire. And what a non-secured fire is, we'll get to. But if the firefighters go up the staircase to a fire on the 2nd floor, I don't have a problem them being below the fire. I don't have a problem them being outside of the fire compartment. But as soon as they go above the fire and into another apartment above the fire, that's where it starts getting tricky. Of course, we know that if we have a fire on the 2nd floor, or maybe you want to rescue people on the 2nd floor, you try to get up that staircase. If there's a fire on the same floor or even below you, by thermal forces, that will rise. And this is an example from a training burn we did. We had a fire on the 2nd floor, fire on the 1st floor, and you see this awesome fire coming from the 1st floor, and then it's going to start wrapping up around the corner, going up the staircase. It doesn't want to go out because it takes the path of least resistance as going into the draft of the fire above, and with the thermal column starting to rise. And you go from a sort of okay situation to holy crap in a very short period of time. And that's what happens when you're above the fire. A real fire could look like something like this. There's a bad quality, but you see there's a fire in the basement on this house. The upper floor, the floor where the firefighter is going to enter, is closed, so there's not really an outlet. There's no real chimney. But when the firefighters start opening the door, and that's where you create the chimney, and now the entire 2nd floor starts to become flames. And of course, nobody could survive. You don't want to be above the fire. Now, sometimes that's very tricky because if maybe you arrive to a fire like this, you're trying to get into the front door, and you don't really realize that there's a little bit of smoke coming from a small window in the bottom here close to the ground from the basement. Later you see clearly that there's smoke pushing from that small window that's behind, the small bushes in the bottom coming from the basement. This is a basement fire. The problem, of course, the basement fire is that if you go around to the 1st floor, you're basically crawling down the chimney, and that might be a very bad day if you're trying to do something good. So you never want to be above or beyond the fire without the commander knowing. Again, here, training fire, you can see here, if we have fire in a room, a fire can develop really fast. Doesn't have to be a training fire, depending on the situation. So you might go into a building, maybe you went into this corridor here and you took a left or you took a right to go search for people. Maybe you're trying to find the fire, you really didn't see it. And when you get back, you have fire coming out of the fire compartment, your possible retreat is compromised. In this, another again, training scenario, we're doing a burn on the second floor. We can see the burn inside the fire compartment. And the time it takes from no smoke in the secondary compartment, but the firefighters are, to flames in the entire smoke layer above the firefighters' heads are just a couple seconds. And again, that's maybe the retreat path if you go past that room, past that fire. Another example from a burn in Norway I did. You have a smoke layer above your head. A couple seconds later, that smoke layer ignites. Now it's a whole different situation to try to get past that fire compartment if you extend it to the other side trying to search for people, for instance. You don't never want to be above or beyond a non-secured fire. So what is a temporary secured fire? So if we want to go past it, we have to make sure it's safe. And my definition to define a fire as temporary secured, it needs to be isolated with a working door. So if you close a normal door, that holds for at least a short period of time. And or if it's guarded by personnel with some kind of extinguishing media. Now, even if that's just an extinguisher, at least they will be able to notify you that there's a problem and you can retreat. So someone is guarding it. But if you just dampen the fire, if you just get into the fire compartment, put some water on it, and now you go past the fire compartment, now it's not secure because it can reignite and it can grow behind us and we don't really know what's going on. So we want to behind a temporary secure fire. Now, even if you close a door, again, that's just a temporary secured fire. Eventually that door is going to fail. It burns through, or maybe in this case, like the actual locking mechanism is failing, so the door opens, and now you have a fire behind you. And that we really don't want. So you never want to be above or beyond a non-secured fire. If you want to do that, which is totally fine in a lot of cases, it's, that might not be a problem at all. But to do that, you have to ask the commander, because I, as a commander, want to know. And then I say, yes, you can, or no, you can't. Walls and ceilings should be visible in the room you're in. So if you are a firefighter, you run around, maybe you're trying to isolate the fire, maybe you're trying to search for people, maybe you're trying to find the fire. There's a little bit of smoke in the room. 2 thumbs up. This is not a problem. You should know that you should protect yourself with the breathing apparatus. If it's toxic gases, maybe it's high CO, but you should know that as normal risks, but it's not a problem. Now, this is a more complicated situation because the ceiling is clearly visible, but I can't really see the wall on the other side of the fire. So the fire is fairly small, the room is big. So technically, ones and zeros, black and white, this is not okay. You have to ask the commander to be inside. Maybe if I'm a commander and someone tells me, hey, there's a fire in here, the smoke has good visibility, but I can't really see the other side of the wall. Is it okay if I go forward here with a handheld extinguisher and make a suppression attempt? Maybe I'll say yes if I really know the firefighter, I know their capabilities, I know their judgment, and I'm happy with that. Or maybe as a commander, I'll say, I'll come with you, I'll make that assessment. And then maybe I'll say, yeah, you can do it alone, or maybe you have to take another person with you, or maybe you have to bring a hose line with you to have some safe means to getting out if the visibility goes worse. That's my decision as a commander. What is the most important thing is that the firefighter knows what they can and cannot do without asking me. In this case, we see clear path to the fire. It's very easy to get in, but you can't really make out the ceiling. So you have limited visibility. To me, it's very obvious. No, you can't go inside here if you're alone, if you're a single firefighter. But if you were to ask me, can I go inside alone with a breathing apparatus and you're a sort of decent firefighter? Of course I can. But that is my decision as a commander, because I will judge you by, what training do you have? What capabilities do you have? Are you fit for duty? What kind of backup is there outside or close by if something happens? If you collapse halfway in, is there someone close by I can send in to get you out? Can I myself go in and drag you out? There's a whole bunch of things I can judge on that as a commander, but it should be clear, very clear as a firefighter. No, you can't go in there because you can't see the ceiling. Same here. Can a firefighter go inside here without notifying the commander, 3 meters in, do a dry chem attack on that room in here? No, you can't see the ceiling. It's very easy. You can't see the ceiling. If you ask me as a commander, if I were here, of course you can go in there. You have great gear on you. You have great gear, just 3 meters in, go in there and knock the fire down with the dry chem extinguisher. Try closing the door. No problem whatsoever. But it's my decision as a commander. I need to know that you're there. What kind of resources do I have to back you up? If you get a heart attack in the hallway here, how can I get you out? That's my decision, not yours as a firefighter. So ask the commander if you want to go inside. But the clarity is the most important thing. You should be very clear about what you're expected not, because otherwise, me as a commander I don't know what you're supposed to do and what you can't do if this is not clear. Without an SCBA, I expect you to use a CO monitor, meaning that someone in the compartment should have a CO monitor, because if I'm not there and I make the decision, the CO is a silent killer. It's a surprisingly high amounts on structural fires, hidden fires, and glowing fires, which might be a problem. So tactical considerations or thoughts or restrictions: be maximum 10 seconds outside of the commander's view. You do not lock down vehicles. Do not open holes bigger than an apple for more than 10 seconds, and abort own initiatives when ordered by the commander. And the personal safety restrictions: never be above or beyond the non-secured fire. Walls and ceilings should be visible in the room you're in. And without an SCBA, use CO monitor inside. If you follow these or something similar to this, I am very confident in that the firefighters will not get hurt. I mean, still, they are supposed to be normally trained. They can slip and fall. They can do lots of things to get hurt, but these will avoid the most obvious things that are not supposed to happen. So we have this, that if we're supposed to give firefighters autonomy, we need a clear expectation what they're supposed to do, the possible tasks, divide them pre-assigned or at arrival, but they should have a framework to operate within. And you need clear restrictions to know that I have control, because I know they won't start doing interior tasks by themselves and so on. And then you create your list of what are the possible tasks we can divide. Now you can divide one of these to a pre-assigned position, or all of them, depending on your level of how much you want to create autonomy. Most departments and so on choose to start with 1 or 2 or 3 and build from there to slowly, gradually give more autonomy to firefighters during arrival. It's very hard to do everything at once, because you need to be very specific about what you can and cannot do. I want to try to, because we have some time, I'm trying to dive into some of the examples of tasks that we can do. I did the transitional attack lecture. It was on YouTube for your colleagues. That entails a lot of the bullets on how to search and cool flames. So I will try to focus on the other ones today, on the firefighter duties. Every one of these items that you're supposed to create autonomy around has to have these kind of training package or standard operating guidelines. You can call it whatever you like. It has to clearly define what they're supposed to do, how to do it, and what not to do. Sorry, wrong one. So the first thing that all firefighters, if I'm dividing this on a group of 1+4, everybody is supposed to search and evacuate life. It's not one person, it's everyone. So are there lives to save? That's a relevant question to ask. And I think many of you have seen the UL study videos about how fires behave in buildings. So they monitor different rooms, different locations, and how much poisonous gases, the survivability. There's tons and tons of these videos. If you haven't seen them, you're living under a rock and you should crawl up and look at the world. But what they found out was that, of course, you can survive a fire, even if it's burning really badly inside of a house or an apartment. If you're far further away at the floor, definitely you can survive. You know, there's lots of survivable spaces. If you're inside a hall, inside of a bedroom that's closed, inside a closed room, you can survive for long periods of times, even if the fire is rocking outside. There's fire blowing out of the windows. What really was the outcome, one of the outcomes for me, and I think many, was that it was really disproving that it's possible from the outside to judge if there's survivable space inside. It's impossible. You don't know. When I was taught as a commander, I was taught basically if there's fire blowing out of every window on a villa, then you can just go like, nah, nobody can survive in there, so why do anything? We just protect the exposures and let it burn. No, that's not true. That doesn't mean we can do anything. It's just, but it does mean that it's possible to survive on the inside. If you're sitting inside a closet in there, if you're sitting inside a closed room, if you're lying under a bed or something, you can definitely survive even if there's fire blowing out of basically every window. So it's not possible. So how do you judge when to allow for rescue or to anticipate rescue? Well, there's no credible information that the building is empty. That means if you don't know if it's empty, you're in rescue mode. We assume there's someone in there unless we think it's not. The other criteria is when we can create a better chance of survival in the building or search for people in a bad situation, meaning can we do something about it? Then we're in rescue mode. So we need those two things. We need to think that there's someone inside, or at least we don't have credible information that there's no one inside. So if we don't know, we're in rescue mode, but we also have to be able to do something about it, either by, for instance, cooling from the outside and ventilating to create a better environment inside. Now we're starting to do rescue, or in combination with it, go inside and search and try to drag people out. We're in rescue mode. If we can't do anything, now we maybe not be in rescue mode because we can't do anything about it. The Dutch created the 4 quadrants for strategy, which I think was an excellent way of sort of setting a strategy that you can do in a defensive exterior attack, meaning you attack the building from outside. You have no intention of going inside. That would be a defensive exterior attack. You're never going to go inside. You'll only attack it from outside. You can make a defensive interior attack, meaning you have a part of the building where you're no intention of going inside, but you're going inside another part of the building to be able to externally protect that from burning down. So you're basically defensively attacking a part of the building from the inside. You can have an offensive interior attack, meaning my intention is to go inside and I am going inside. or you can do an offensive exterior attack, meaning my intention is to go inside, but I first have to attack it from outside because I don't have enough resources. Maybe it's not safe enough. Maybe it's more effective to do it from the outside first, and then I go inside. All of these could be in rescue. All of this allow for rescue. Rescue is a mode. If you're in rescue mode or not, it's not a strategy. It's not part of a strategy. It's either or. So you can have a defensive exterior attack. I need to protect, I need to suppress this building. I'm not going to go inside the building because I need to rescue people in the other building that's next to it. So all of these strategies can be in rescue mode. And we need to assume rescue. If nothing else is stated, assume rescue. If a fire truck arrives to a fire and I'm sitting in the control room, or I'm another vehicle responding to that scene, if there's no arrival report, my first thought should not be, cannot be that, oh, they forgot about it and they're, writing a report now. No, they're busy trying to pick people up from falling from the building. That's what's happening right now. We assume that this chaos on scene and all hands are working. Nobody has time to do an arrival report. We assume that. The system assumes that. If there's no arrival report, let's bring extra resources because something is happening. That's not typically how it's done, which is wrong, because the response of the system is typically based on an average fire, not the extreme. And it's the extreme that we're there for. We're not there to run automatic fire alarms and nothing happens. It's a side gig. We are here for the worst day of these persons' lives. So what I mean with this is that we assume every firefighter that responds to this fire, and I'm going as a commander, I assume if I don't tell them anything, they're in rescue mode. They assume there will be babies falling from balconies when we arrive. Everybody is in rescue mode. We need them to search around the buildings, scan through the smoke. We use thermal imagers, of course, to scan the building through inside the building, scan through openings to see through smoke. We scan externally after things. If you have a fire like this, you can scan above the fire, see, do we have windows that are open, for instance? If we have windows that are open behind the smoke, that's a potential rescue because we have smoke going into fire, going into the next apartment above. Crucial things to look for when we do that. We want to search into the building. We search the area inside the openings. Every time, if I'm charged with knocking the fire down, I'm going to go to an opening. I'm going to first search the opening, see if there's anyone in here, and then I'm going to attack the fire if I can do it at the same time. Everybody's responsible to scan into openings. If I have thermal imager, shout, listen, can I hear anyone? And of course, I assume as a commander, if they find anyone, I want them to evacuate all persons from dangerous spaces. I don't need them to go on the radio, go like, I found one person here in the staircase. Should I bring them down? Of course. Of course you should bring them down. You should take everybody who potentially might be in harm's way out of there. But don't assume that people evacuate themselves. If you're going around maybe adjacent spaces, maybe there's some smoke there, don't be surprised if you find someone who hasn't evacuated, even though there's smoke in the apartment. There's a guy sitting here trying to get his socks on. A lot of people don't want to leave. You can't force them, but at least you can try to be persuasive and then notify the commander. I got a person in here that's smoking in the apartment. They don't want to leave because they're scared of losing their stuff. Understandably. We shouldn't assume that people always self-evacuate. So everybody on the scene is responsible for this search and evacuate life. Everybody should do this all the time. Now to that, you probably connect someone needs to search and isolate flames and smoke. So we want someone running around trying to make it worse for the fire. There shouldn't be any openings larger than an apple to this fire. That's the goal. So if you see a fire like this, you have fire coming out of the side of the building on second floor, and you see the opening in the front, the big entry door. This is of course the inlet to the fire. We have an outlet on the top floor. We have an inlet here. This is obvious. If I close this door, the fire on the second floor is going to struggle. It's not going to die. It's not going to extinguish itself. It's just going to struggle. It's not going to grow as fast. It's not going to produce as much power. Now, maybe I want to search the first floor first because I'm always responsible for search. I run around the first floor first and then I close it. Maybe I do a dry chem attack if I'm responsible for attacking the fire. I run up a staircase and do a dry chem attack and then I go back and close the door. Maybe there's people evacuating. Of course, then I help them evacuate. Then I close the door. Maybe if the door is a self-closing one and locks, maybe I don't want to close it all the way because it might get locked and I can't get back in. Maybe I'll close it halfway to reduce the amount of oxygen coming in. There's a lot of considerations, of course. It's a guideline. It's a general thing to achieve. We want to close this one. But in this case, it's very obvious that this is an inlet because I can see the fire here and, it's very close. So that's the chimney effect here. But a lot of times it's not obvious because the inlet might be far away removed from the actual fire. And you don't really know where the oxygen is coming from a lot of times. So you close every door you find because it might be contributing to the fire. If you see something like this is a pressurized smoke coming from the ceiling here. You see there's this pushing out sustained pressure. That's not a normal behavior if there's no inlet anywhere. There has to be an inlet to create that chimney. It's impossible for it otherwise. Maybe if it's a battery cell fire, so there's energy being created inside the cells, maybe something like that. But that would be a rare case, something different. This is somewhere in this building, there's an inlet feeding all that pressure, all that chimney effect to push out of that window. We need to close that to reduce the energy. Maybe you run into a house and try to search for people and you see this. Oh, that's of course it's the inlet. Now you need to close that door into that house to reduce the amount of oxygen coming to that fire. Does that mean you should always do it? Yeah, if you don't have a better option. Does it mean it will get worse between the fire in this case and the inlet? Yeah, probably, because the smoke is will fill up between the fire and the door, and that might make it worse. But it might make it better on the other side of the fire, where you obviously have an exhaust somewhere, and that part of the building going to make it better. So it's a balance. Sometimes it's probably good, sometimes bad, but if you don't know, close it. That's generally better to reduce the spread of the fire. And sometimes it's not about maybe even now. You don't even know that it's going to contribute, but it might contribute 30 minutes later. If you close the door, it's not part of the fire behavior right now. There's no oxygen coming in, there's no smoke coming out, but 30 minutes later in the accident, that is the actual fire break that protects the part of the structure. Doors are excellent, but they only work if they're closed. Otherwise, it's just a hole. So we want to close all windows, hatches, outer and inner doors. So we close more than we have to. That's one of the tasks we're trying to do. So we just go up and close the door. And there's no smoke in the ceiling. There's no on the wall. Safe to do so. Close the door. And boom, we have saved ourselves lots and lots and lots of time. Now we open it again because it's training. But it's a fantastic tool. Now in this case, you have smoke in the ceiling. You have to ask the commander if it's okay, but if the commander says 2 thumbs up, you run in, you close the door. Now you save yourself a lot of time. As soon as you close that door, the energy starts to disappear. The smoke is going to cool off. The visibility is going to improve because it's ventilation further off. Everything gets better most of the time. You maybe block openings with existing materials. There's nothing saying that you can't use what exists. In this case, it's just a training, and the firefighter here, which is actually me, are just pulling a cabinet in front of the door, using it as a temporary door to slow the fire progress down. Is it very smooth? No, to use outdoor, but you can use anything. If there's a board standing on the house, you can use it to board up the window. Or my favorite example is to bring a lot of, if you're a first responder in a small truck, you use normal fire blankets and a staple gun, and you bring that fire blanket. You see a window that's, acting as an inlet, for instance, or fire blowing out. You do a dry chem attack, and then you take a staple gun and you doom, boom, doom, 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 put that fire blanket there, and you bought yourself a tremendous amount of time. Maybe you're on the countryside. Maybe it'll take you 5 minutes for the fire truck to arrive, and so on. And you can seal openings with portable smoke curtains. In this case, it's Dr. Mike Reich's fire curtain, fire officer from Germany. It's a fantastic product. It's just a fire blanket with a device to let you hang it in doorways in different places with it very smoothly. And now you can seal off buildings, and you can place them in the smoke and before the smoke arrives, and really far away, just to make sure that if the fire spreads, we are protecting the escape routes, we are protecting the staircases, and so on. Fantastic tool, should be mandatory on every appliance in the world. So we want to have someone searching and isolating flames and smoke. And again, this might not seem obvious. This might seem some obvious that, if I see a door, I want to close it before we have any thought about going inside. We're going to do an interior attack. But I remember so many instances that where I, as the crew commander, didn't remember to tell someone to close the door. Because there's so much else things I'm thinking about. And if the firefighters are not allowed to do things by themselves, they're not going to do it. Otherwise, they basically break in the rule. So I have to remember everything and do everything. That means even obvious things will get missed. So someone should search and isolate the fire. Another thing I want to get done is I want to ventilate smoke-filled adjacent spaces. So someone should try to make it better, get the smoke out of there. Now, there's some restrictions because we don't want to ventilate any space that has a fire in it. So no fire may exist in the space which is ventilated. So I don't want firefighters running around and starting breaking windows to a space where there is a fire. That would be horrible. We don't want any openings larger than an apple between the space that is burning and the space that is to be ventilated. Generally, because of course, if we ventilate a space and there's a big hole in between them, we're supplying oxygen and getting rid of smoke and making the fire grow faster. But anything smaller than an apple is not going to make a huge difference. And we can't have hot smoke, meaning we can't have hot smoke that's hotter than 150 degrees in the space that we want to ventilate, because that's a sign of something is going on in there. There is a fire that we haven't really found yet. There's a hole somewhere. There's hot smoke leaking. No, we don't want to ventilate this space before we actually know what's going on. So it might look like this. This might be the adjacent, row house or something. There's no fire here. It's just smoke leaking here. Okay, we have a window. Boom, open the window, let that out. So open window and doors. I want firefighters to open to get as much natural cross draft through the space as possible. And generally, more openings work better. So we want as much openings as possible. Now, as a commander, I might reevaluate that and say, no, we want to create pressure, which is something different than ventilation. I want to pressurize this space. I'm going to close all the windows and doors, put a fan there, and create an overpressure. That's a commander decision. But this, before we get to that point, or as a start, is fantastic. Get rid of the smoke, and then we pressurize by closing them. Now, a very special room of that is the staircase, because the staircase is, of course, one of those adjacent spaces that we really do want to ventilate. The staircase is the most important room in any house, but especially the multi-residential houses. So we don't want to ventilate a staircase with a combustible staircase or lots of flammable materials. So for me as a commander, I want them, if the firefighter is running up the staircase with the intention of ventilating it, it has to be sort of clean. It has to be non-combustible, which is a standard in Sweden, at least. If it's anything above 2 floors, then it is a non-combustible staircase. Because I don't want to create a chimney inside that. I want to create a fire in the actual staircase. I could do that as a commander. I can say, oh, let's do that anyway, because I've assessed the situation, but I don't want that to happen without me knowing it. It's only applicable for non-complicated staircases. What's a non-complicated staircase? Well, it's something like this with big landings. There's the risk of people getting disoriented here. So if I send a firefighter, or wrong word, if the firefighter chooses to run up the staircase to try to ventilate it, to try to search it, but we just get to, it can't be like this because there's a risk of them getting disoriented if there's smoke and they don't find their way out. It has to be a simple, a non-complicated staircase where it's easy to find your way even if there's smoke. And again, you can't never be above or beyond a non-secured fire, meaning I don't want people to be above or beyond so that they possibly the retreat is compromised. Again, the definition of a temporary fire is that we have to close the door. In that case, maybe the fire compartment, the fire apartment, we close that door. Now we can run up the staircase and ventilate it and search it. But if we can't close the door, it has to be a person there with some kind of extinguishing media to make sure that it doesn't grow again, doesn't become a threat. Might look like this. In this case, they have a hose. That's because that's what the video provided. But it might look like this. You arrive and there's fire in the staircase. Now, boom, you shut the door and then you run up and try to ventilate it. Or if you already have ventilated it, try to search it. So a closed functional apartment door is enough to assume that the fire is temporarily secured. It doesn't mean that you can stay 20 minutes above the fire. It means that you can run up the staircase and down again and make a quick search. That's 2 minutes. So what is the task? Well, start with opening and securing the staircase door. So you want to open the staircase door to provide and use that as an inlet. And that's surprisingly often not part of what the task is when you start to ventilate the staircase with a smoke hatch. You need an inlet. You need to open the smoke hatch or window in top of staircase. So in most cases, if it's a big staircase in Sweden, you would have a smoke hatch, which you operate from the bottom. You crank it open or push a button and it opens further up, which of course is the easiest part. Otherwise, you have to run up and actually break a window or open a window if it's a smaller staircase. Now, if you open an outlet in the top and have an inlet in the bottom, you of course create a chimney. And the question was for a long time, and still partly is, if you have a fire in the staircase, a fire in an apartment, and that extends through an open door out in the staircase, are you by opening the staircase smoke hatch and the inlet door, creating that draft, that chimney, are you making the fire in the apartment much worse, and are you making the conditions in the staircase much worse? Now the Swedish Statens Haverikommission, the Swedish Accident Investigation Board, made a report, big report on the Rinkebybranden, which is a fire where 7 people died in Sweden in the staircase. And they looked at this exact topic closely. Because the scenario was that the fire service arrived, the door to the fire compartment, just on the 3rd floor, had burned off. So the fire was extending out in the staircase. The fire service arrived, opened the inlet door, but the smoke hatch was broken. And what they wanted to know was if it would work, would it made it better in the staircase? Because now 7 people died because they couldn't evacuate the smoke in the staircase very fast. And the study was very conclusive in that in every scenario, the conditions in the staircase dramatically improved when the smoke is. I'm not going to go into details in the graphs, but as hydrogen cyanide, CO, particulate concentration, visibility, everything, temperature, everything went better in the staircase, even though you had a rocking fire out in the staircase when you started to ventilate it. So you want to open the smoke hatch, but if the smoke hatch fails, if you can't get the smoke out, consider using another apartment as the outlet. So if we have a bad fire, it's better to clear the staircase through another apartment, which is empty, of course, rather than not having to be able to clear the staircase. You want to close the apartment door or dampen the fire as soon as possible. Of course, this draft through the staircase is going to make the fire in the apartment worse. Yes, it will make it worse. So you want to close that door as fast as possible. Alternative, get water on it, try to dampen it in some way. If it fails, if you can't dampen the fire, if the door to the apartment is burned off, then shut the inlet door in the staircase in that case. So we've cleared the staircase, but we're struggling to fight the fire in the apartment. Now close the inlet door in the staircase. Now you're taking away that inlet of oxygen, and we're going to make the fire slower, the fire less intense. Regardless, you want to close all other open doors. So the person who runs into the staircase, they open the inlet door, they open the smoke hatch, they run up, and they close all doors, including the apartment to the fire door, on their way up. They, of course, try to search and evacuate all the people they find in the staircase. And when the outlet is created, as soon as possible, you start a fan in the inlet and you put it on low power. So it wouldn't be full power, it would be low power. You just want to add a draft through the staircase to increase the amount of smoke that we can push out. But you don't want it at high power, because if you put it at high power, there's a risk of pushing smoke into the other apartments because the smoke hatch can't evacuate enough pressure, enough flow. So you want to have it at low power until the commander decides, yes, let's increase the power. Let's increase, which also the risk of pushing smoke into other apartments. And the easy answer is, if there's smoke in the staircase, you put it on low. If it starts to get clear, you put it on high, because now you're not pushing smoke into other compartments. You're just pushing it into the fire compartment. So that's the staircase. I want that to happen as fast as possible. So we have these different tasks again.
Lars, we cannot hear you. Did you turn off your mic?
I don't know. It was something automatic. I didn't do it, but yes, now I can.
Great.
Sorry. So we have this list of things that we need to get done. We have this for firefighters: search and evacuate life. Everybody's responsible. Everyone who runs around and have a different task is still responsible for this. But maybe that's combined with cooling flames and smoke. So you run around trying to do a transitional attack. You're trying to do a fire extinguisher attack on the inside, but you're also searching for life. Someone else is running around and trying to isolate the fire, because they're most of the time, they're not on the same place. They're looking for different things. They have a different mentality. One is looking for, where's the smoke going? How can I prevent the smoke from contaminating other spaces? How can I isolate the fire as much as possible? While someone else is thinking, how can I reach the flames and suppress the flames as fast as possible? Different geographic positions, different mindsets. And someone's running around maybe trying to ventilate every place that is isolated. Or maybe that's the same person. It depends on how much crews you have. The more you can divide the tasks, the less things each individual has to focus on, the better that task will be performed. Now you lose some of the coordination between those, but a lot of times that's not a problem. I talked about before this shared situational awareness, this utopia of everybody knows everything. That's not how it works in reality. You have someone on the backside of the building. They know what's going on there. They think they're trying to attack the fire. They will deal with that problem from that position. You have someone in the staircase. They know what's happening in the staircase. They're trying to evacuate people there. They know what's going on here. You as a commander probably don't know any one of those at the start. You just have to trust that they're trying to solve their domain as best as possible. And when you find out, you might make it a priority to go there and help and assess the situation. But that's maybe if you even find it out. We all try to divide that so geographically and what we're trying to do that you have your domain of trying to do good. We have a little bit of time left before questions, so I'll dive into the last of the firefighter tasks of finding the fire and cooling it. So the first objective, if you have one firefighter divided towards, you want to have them do something about the flames. You want to cool it. You need to find it first. That would be the first priority. Find visible flames. It's pretty obvious. You want to, if you see visible flames, okay, that's the fire. It might not be the fire. It might not be the best place to put water. It might be, this might be a secondary fire compartment. And if you put water here, it might not do that much. But this time we're looking for something obvious. Okay, there's fire coming out of here. We're not going to save any fire for later. Let's attack that one. Maybe you can see it through a window. Okay, that's where fire is. Let's try to attack that somehow. Okay, you're running into the house. Again, we saw that before. Okay, that's the fire. Let's try to do something about that fire. They're trying to look to see where do we have most flames. If you don't have visible flames, try to find hidden heat sources. Of course, use the thermal imager. In this case, it's a training fire. We can see that there's hoses going into the first floor. We can see smoke and heat coming out of the entry point. If you look at the windows, what we're looking for is irregularities. We're not looking for high temperatures. That's the problem, because most firefighters would go around looking with a spot meter in the middle and go, oh, it's only -7 degrees. There's no fire here. We're not looking for temperature. We're looking for things that look odd. Why is the left bottom window more hot at the vent point? Maybe that's a sign there's a fire. Maybe it's because it's closed on the other window. It's open on the left window, and that's just normal heat. I don't know, but it's a sign. Why is the top window on the second floor hot on the left side, not the right side? Maybe they forgot insulation on that one. Maybe it's, poorly insulated. That's a normal heat signature. I don't know. Maybe it's a fire. You go that looking. What's the irregularity? Might there be a fire here, or is something normal? Is it a hot water pipe inside the wall, or is this a crawling fire? You see smoke coming from a wall. Where's the heat? Well, again, the thermal imager shows you, okay, I think the heat is somewhere here. That's where I want to put, in this case, my piercing nozzle, my fog nail, to get it in and cool the space behind it. You need to find where's the heat source. But a lot of times the smoke can arrive in a completely different position where the heat is. We always have to remember that buildings are insulated. On the left side, you see the thermal imager. You see no indication whatsoever on the fire. On the right side, there's lots of smoke pushing out because buildings are insulated. It takes a lot of time for heat signatures to go through materials. So the thermal imager is not by any means an X-ray machine. Or you can, of course, find hot smoke. You can also use thermal imager. And sometimes it's very obvious. Well, that's hot smoke. Where's the hottest smoke? Well, you can use the thermal imager, or you can see with your naked eye where's the most buoyancy. The hottest smoke is probably closest to the fire. That's where I want to make my attack. That's where I want to cool. I want to get as close as possible to the source of the fire, of the smoke. So after you find the fire, you of course want to do something about it. And I say cool and search and cool all flames and smoke above 150 degrees. Now you ask me, why 150 degrees? What's so magical about that? It's a practical number. So if you have smoke, flames is of course always above 150 degrees. It's 600, 700, 800, 900 degrees. But if you have smoke and the smoke is below 100 degrees, it's very hard to do something about it in terms of cooling it. It's not very efficient. It won't do a lot of good. It mostly creating water damages or dry chem damages. Cold smoke, meaning it's roughly below 100. We need to ventilate out to get rid of it. We can't really cool it to make it less combustible or something like that. But anything that's above 150, we have something to do about it to reduce the amount of flammability of it and to reduce the potential damages and turning to fire by cooling it. So we want to cool something, and 150 degrees is roughly where you start to be somewhat effective with cooling it. It has nothing to do with the flammability of smoke, besides the fact that the hotter it is, the more likely it is to be flammable. But you might have cold smoke that are explosive. You might have super hot smoke that is impossible to burn. So that's not the reason for 150 degrees. It's the practical reason about we can cool. So if you have a small object on fire, you can use a carbon dioxide extinguisher. 1 to 2 meters for what is burning. Search for openings where you can get that gas to enter, and use the carbon dioxide extinguisher. And this is a video from like a educational video for the public. That's an excellent tool for you and for firefighters to be able to suppress a very small fire. But you have to consider that small spaces may become oxygen limited if you use it inside a closet and you, for some reason, standing inside the closet too without a breathing protection. Otherwise, it's probably not a risk. You might also use a water extinguisher, possibly with additives. So a water extinguisher is great because it doesn't pollute anything else for a small fire. You probably want to start 1 to 3 meters when it's burning, meaning you have to be fairly close. You want to aim at the base of the flames. You want to cool the surfaces starting from low and work your way upwards. I'm going to show an example on that later, but with a hose line. Steam rises and suppresses flames above, so you always need to start at the bottom. Firefighters are really bad at this because they're taught to gas cool. So all the firefighters start up on the flames. Firefighters really have to be taught, and as a commander, you have to make sure that the firefighters are taught how to surface cool. You start at the bottom and work your way up. Additives might increase the effectiveness, so you might have additives like different foams and different additives. But that may or may not be good for your health. It could be either way, or they may or may not be good for the environment. And it's really hard to say because it varies from application and also what kind of additive it is. Now, if you talk larger external fires, so it's a fire on the wall, on the outside of the house, now you might probably want to use a dry chem extinguisher instead, so more potential. 2 to 5 meters away from what's burning. I'm aim primarily against the base of the flames. Again, you need to go for the surfaces. Not that dry can cool surfaces well. It cools it somewhat, but dry chem will follow the flames up. And you need to cover all the surfaces at the same time. And this is where the magic comes in. You have to cover all the surfaces at the same time, which means you have to be fast. If you look at a professional tester, when they're trying to do a liquid fire, they will spread the dry chem over the surface really aggressively, because if they let any slip through the cracks, the fire will burn around and come back. They need to cover all the surfaces all the time, push it forward. That's how you suppress a fire. You want to continue even if the flames disappear. Expect reignition because it doesn't cool surfaces really well. And you should consider a large dry chem system. What do I mean by large? It's a vehicle-mounted suppression system. This is from Airport Fire Rescue Service. This is a fantastic tool. I would love to have that on a fire truck. imagine just rocking out and dragging 100 kilos of dry chem at a big rocking fire at a facade or something. Oh, it would be amazing as a first strike option. But it's very uncommon to have those. You also, of course, you can use a lay flat hose with a nozzle on external fire. You want to aim primarily at the base of the flames again. You want to cool surfaces and starting low and work your way upwards. Steam rises and suppresses the flames. As an example, in this case, a lay flat hose, big external fire. The firefighter starts a little bit high, going up on the facade. Useless water because it will just be vaporized by all the heat coming from below. You need to start low, in this case at the base of this establishment that is burning or apartment, whatever that might be. And then when you've got most of the suppression down in the bottom done, then start to work your way up. So in this case, this firefighter makes really good progress on the fire in the bottom by just a normal lay flat hose, maybe a 45 mil or something. And then you can start working way up. I'm not saying he solved the problem, but he made it a lot better. You need to use a high flow for a short time, at least 300 liters per minute. This is a horrible example. Fire service comes up using a 19 mil or equivalent hose reel. It's simply not enough water. You're just going to be super ineffective. We have been taught to use as little water as possible for water damages, but this is not good. You want to use a lot of water, but you use it for a short period of time. This is not going to work. In this case, instead, it's a 44 mil or something like that. You could have started more at the bottom, but because the flow is much higher, it's super easy to just cover the surfaces with enough flow, enough water to cool them down. You're going to see an example here from the right. You're going to see a 38 mil with bad pressure. So the flow and pressure and throw distance is really bad, but you can see there's still a fairly big line. European made. There's a lot of hose reels in Europe. We can see that they're struggling to get the water where it needs to go. And also when you get it close, it's not very effective. They're getting headway, they're working, they're trying to cool. But on the left side, you will see a 63 mil or equivalent of a 63 mil hose line. And you will see the dramatic difference in terms of how fast you're getting suppression by adding water. More water on a shorter period of time. This is just an example. I'm not saying that this is a scientific study. I'm just saying that this is the thing you should think about. More flow, shorter time. You want to use a wide stream as possible. Start with a straight stream and make sure it reaches the surfaces. So if you're going to throw water on the wall, you have to make sure that it reaches the wall. And it's really hard to judge if it does. So if you're even the slightest unsure, use a straight stream and flow it over. You might go a little bit wider, but you should really hear it like crashes on the surfaces, like splashing on the surfaces, because from where you're standing, it might look like you're getting water on the wall, but it's just blowing away in the wind and in the plume of the fire, and actually the fire just eating it up and nothing reaches the surfaces. You have the reach up. If you want to work up on the ceiling, you have 19 mil going up to 3 floors above. Really avoid it. Don't use hose reels for external firefighting. It might look like you're getting anywhere, but the flow is too low and the throw distance is too low. Like a 38, 42 in that range, you might get 5 floors up, struggling at the 5th floor. And if you go on a bigger line, 63, 76 millimeter or something equivalent, maybe you get 7 floors or maybe 8 floors, depending on pressure and type of nozzle you use. And that's probably where we need to take a break. So that's for large external fires. And just to wrap up this chapter, write that down. If you have a room fire with an opening to the room, water extinguisher, great for just whipping around inside the room, running up the staircase. dry chem extinguisher, one of my favorites, to run up the staircase using inside the structure. I know that Finland is doing great with extinguisher work. It's fantastic to see those initial knockdowns. Of course, you can use a lay flat hose with a nozzle. That's for me, like what the firefighters can choose by themselves. Lay flat hose or a dry chem, two great options. Very easy to disconnect the lay flat hose if the commander wants to move the truck after 30 seconds, a minute into the incident. And if you have a room fire without an opening, using dry chem with a nail. Now, these are just examples. There's many more examples you can find on using as a first strike tool. But these are some of my favorites that are very ubiquitous. Okay, Joel, I'll cut it there. Maybe I'll just do a short recap on the problems and what I think is most important.
Sure.
Again, you have to really think about what can you outsource? What can you make our firefighters do without messing up? And you need to create frameworks. Just like you have a framework for the interior attack, you need framework for doing things on the outside so that you can let go of that as a commander and focus on the things that you really don't have an option to automate, in lack of a better word, that you can do out. So you really have to think about it. And the list I just provided is just one example of the things you can do and how to divide them. Yes, Joel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lars. Very comprehensive and interesting presentation. So, the people, we have time for questions now, and we have the first question from Petter. How would you train on these standard operating procedures? A lot of options, and they all depend on what the situation is when you arrive at the scene. How do you simulate this?
Well, first off, bite-sized chunks. You don't eat, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You have to divide it. It's impossible to train on everything at once. So when you, for instance, do something like this, like every change, you start with one thing and one aspect. Let's say we just, at multi-family houses, we automate one firefighter to always be responsible of checking and making sure the staircase is free. If it's not free, ventilate it, and, close doors and so on. So you select one thing and then you train on that standard procedure until that sort of is part of the normal operating procedure. And then you add another one. Because like Petter says, it is extremely hard to train on things which have so many different conditions. And all you have in your training facility is a metal container box with trees around it. So it is challenging, but definitely one thing at a time. Now, it's also very important that you have very clear documents, because you need to always refer back to what is the black and white solution. If nobody's thinking, if nobody's adapting to any changes, are we still sure about what's going to happen? So you write it like that. And I think then you at least have a decent chance of getting a start.
Great. And then the next question from Perius. Här i Finland är det väldigt vanligt att vi har luftpaket på bilen till gruppledaren. Vad är dina tankar om det? Fördelar, nackdelar med att ha gruppledare lite mer hands-on?
I love it. So in Sweden, basically all the air packs on crew commanders were removed. I don't know, starting to get removed maybe 10, 15 years ago. And now basically there's no crew commanders that had air packs on anymore. I think it's a horrible. So again, it goes back to philosophy. So this is my really simple interpretation of what happened with Sweden. We got fire engineers into the system back in the 70s. Great for having it. You have ladder entries, they come in and become senior officers. I really like the system. It brings a lot of value. Now, the downside of that is that command became theoreticalized and crew commanders became, my interpretation, this is my interpretation, is not what was intended, at least. Crew commanders became mini incident commanders. So every thoughts on strategies was pushed down so that even crew commanders became. But if I look at the military, a crew commander in the military is super hands-on. They are in the battleground, they're shooting, they're directing, they're screaming. That's where the crew commander should be. They should be able to drag a hose line if that's needed. They need to step back. Okay, what are we not doing? That's not correct. Go back, fix it. If we need to make an assessment on the inside, okay, I have two options. Maybe I have to stay on the outside because there's no one else in command right now. So then I have to stay on the outside. But if there's someone else, maybe another crew commander's arrived, one of the crew commanders goes inside to make an assessment. Because we're making assessments and decisions on other people's interpretations. Everybody has played the whisper game as a kid. When you sat around a table whispering things. That's just how communication breaks down. Now, if you take interpretation, if you have a firefighter that goes into a building and they say, oh, it's a little bit hot in there. Okay, what does it mean? Okay, does that, someone thinks that 300 degrees is a little bit hot. Someone thinks 7 degrees. There's so many interpretations. And as a commander, crew commander, as soon as possible, I want eyes on what is happening so I can make an assessment. So I would like to have, I don't want crew commanders that are sitting around over the shoulders of the firefighters, not letting the firefighters operate autonomously. That's not what I want. I want crew commanders to be able to help, go in and make assessments, go back out again, report to senior command, maybe go in again, make a new assessment, maybe tweak something at the front line and go back again. I want that. I call them yo-yo officers. They should go forward, they should go back. They should go forward, go back. Now, the incident commander is a different thing. But I also like incident commanders to have a crew air pack because they should also go in sometimes to make an assessment. Because they're making decisions on someone else's interpretation, and they're making interpretation on the interpretation, and it's always late and wrong. So I think it's great that you have the air pack left. I think it's great if you're in the battlegrounds with more hands-on, as long as you make them into yo-yo commanders, that they step a step back. What is the problem? Are we doing the right things? What is not getting done? Boom, everything seems good. Get in and help. On trainings, I see the individually, without a doubt, there's no question about it, the things that breaks and makes a fire team or a fire incident is the crew commanders. It's not incident commander, it's not the firefighters, it's the crew commanders. If you have bad crew commanders, everything breaks down. If you have good crew commanders, they fix everything. They fix bad senior command, they fix bad firefighters. So it is really the most important thing you have. Yeah, that was a long maybe rant on that, but I love it.
Good answer. And then Peter is commenting that he would like to see larger discussion on this in the Finnish firefighting community, and for sure now this is kind of the first scratch for it, and then we were talking already about the continuity. No more questions so far in chat, or no one is raising the hand. So I'm just asking as a last question here. How do the firefighters and commanders feel and think about this when this is implemented in different places? Do you have something to share about this?
Well, if we start with in Sweden, where sort of we went from a system where the commander has all control, and we're starting to change that, at least in certain places. Certain places hate me and everything I say. So don't take my as everything in Sweden. Everyone does what Lars says in Sweden. That's not all the case. But what the firefighters, my experience at the firefighters say is that they all unanimously love it because they're allowed to be autonomous. They're allowed to do their own thinking and taking decisions and making things, not just on the inside, which they typically could, but on the outside also. It's the most diverse opinions is from the officers, and that really ties into them becoming secure enough in that they know what the firefighters are supposed to do and trust that they're not doing something they would consider dangerous or bad. And that goes back to training. If the officers are part of the training, they know what the firefighters are doing, they expect to love it because it frees them up to do the actual things that they need to do, which is tweaking things that needs to be tweaked or evaluating and thinking about the next step. So it really is, at first it's skepticism from the officers, and if you get over the educational hump, it's generally well received, because both parties, both the firefighters and the officers, can focus on what they really want to do, which is, their different domains.
Yes, great. And then Marcus is commenting that I would like to take this into use, and only drawback is that communication is vital and there's only one radio per working pair. And in this framework is quite often that the firefighters are doing things alone. So it would be good to have radio for everyone. So just
well, I wouldn't say that necessarily is a deal breaker. First off, you could have things that pairs do individual. You can have a pair that go up the staircase and do everything. You can have a pair that do transitional attack automatically. You can have a pair that goes and do ventilation. So you could do it in pairs still and still have autonomy on a pair level. But also, I mean, if you're going to do transitional attack, you don't need a radio. If you're going to ventilate an adjacent building and you're going to be away for 10 seconds, you don't need a radio. It's an advantage, but it's not a necessity. It's not like you're doing smoke diving. But I totally agree. If you're going to go up the staircase and it's smoke filled and you need breathing apparatus, you should definitely have a radio. That would be a requirement. I should even write that, but I see that as self-evident, which you shouldn't. So I should really write that. But it is a limitation for sure.
Yeah, great. We are running over time. Thanks a lot, Lars Axelsson, for
Thank you.
Sharing your knowledge for us, and it was our honor to have you here. Then